Hello my fellow travelers, my name is Pierce and this is my channel Tales from the Road. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today we're going to talk about a very unique city in Central Europe, one that often isn't on people's bucket lists for when they travel to this continent, but is nonetheless very nice. The city I'm talking about, of course the namesake of the video, is Bratislava, Slovakia. This city is very close to many other major European capitals that you would visit on a trip to Central Europe, and I think it's pretty nice and has a lot going for it. And today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know before you go, so I can entice you to come to this region of Europe that many people don't often see, and maybe fall in love with a city you didn't even know existed. Come along as we learn about the beautiful capital of Bratislava, Slovakia. As we always do with these videos, let's start with a little historical and geographic context so we can know a little bit more about Bratislava before we go. While many people label Slovakia as just another Eastern European country, realistically, it's right in the heart of Central Europe. It's got Poland to its north, Czechia, the Czech Republic and Austria to its west, Hungary to its south, and Ukraine to its east. Bratislava, however, is in the very west of Slovakia, sitting just about 45 minutes away from Vienna, the capital of Austria. The first thing to note about Bratislava is that it's one of Europe's major Danube River cities. The Danube River, starting in Germany and finishing in the Black Sea, is one of the most important waterways in Central and Eastern Europe. On this river in Europe, cities were built, empires were developed, trade was managed, and wars were fought. It means that the cities that developed on the Danube, including Belgrade, Serbia, Bratislava, Slovakia, Vienna, Austria, and of course the big bad Hungarian capital, Budapest, were extremely important regional hubs for power in Central Europe. They were the cities that everyone wanted to control and everyone needed to defend. That means historically, even though it's a pretty small European capital today, this city was very important. This means that the city of Bratislava, the original settlement, goes back thousands of years to the original Celtic peoples who settled along the Danube River for trade and for fishing, to the Romans who use it as an important military hub defending the Danube from invaders from the east and from barbarians to the north, later to the Slavic peoples that controlled this region and who defined the modern Slovakian people today, to the time of the Middle Ages where Bratislava became a major player in the Hungarian sphere of influence, being called Pressburg at the time, to even becoming one of the most important cities in all of Europe, becoming the capital of Hungary under the Habsburg monarchy after the fall of Budapest to the Ottomans. The end of World War I signified the end of the empire period of Europe, which left Bratislava as part of Greater Czechoslovakia at the time. The 20th century for Slovakia was a tumultuous time, whether it was the invasion and occupation by Nazi Germany in the 40s, the reunification of Czechoslovakia into a communist state, the revolutions that followed, and then the divorce from the Czech Republic in 1993. Becoming its own European nation, Slovakia has become a normalized part of the greater European community. It joined the European Union and the Schengen zone, it uses the euro, and it's a beautiful part of Central Europe that I think a lot more people should visit when they have the chance. With that being said, I hope you learned a little bit about Slovakian history, but let's get on to the more practical information of a trip to the land of rolling green hills and lots of castles. So let's talk about money. As I said earlier, Slovakia uses the euro, which is really easy as an American traveler traveling in the greater European space, because if you got euros in Germany, you can definitely use them in Slovakia. Slovakia itself is definitely going to be a bit cheaper than a trip to Western Europe. Think Belgium, France, the Netherlands. Slovakia has experienced inflation like many of the other Central European countries, so while it is cheap, for American travelers, it certainly isn't as cheap as it used to be. If you're looking to eat out in Slovakia, you probably can get a pretty inexpensive meal between 7 and 10 euros. That's going to be like $8 to $10, $11. Really, the euro to the dollar is very similar. And if you're going to stay in a hostel, probably think around 20 to 30 euros per night, and in a normal hotel, think between 50 and 100 euros, probably in the city center of Bratislava. Transportation. Getting to Bratislava is pretty easy because you have a couple different options. They do have their own airport, which you can of course fly into, but you could also fly to Vienna, which is only about 45 minutes away, and then you could take a bus or a train to Bratislava. Pretty simple. If you're doing kind of a greater Central European trip, many people who end up going to Bratislava do it on their way from Prague to Budapest. A pretty logical trip could be Prague to Vienna, Vienna to Bratislava, Bratislava to Budapest, or vice versa. Prague to Vienna is about 3 hours and 45 minutes by bus, about the same by train. Of course, you add the 45 minutes to go to Bratislava, and Bratislava is then about a 3-hour ride to Budapest. So the total stretch, about 8 hours in total, depending on if you've taken a bus. You could, of course, rent a car. It would be a little bit faster, or you could take a train. Since all these countries are in the Schengen zone, there are no borders between them, so you're not going to need to wait at a border. You don't need to worry about visas. All of that is taken care of when you land in the Schengen zone. And if you have any questions about that, I have a full video dedicated to the Schengen zone, the free movement space in the greater European area. The transportation within Bratislava is actually pretty easy, and realistically, you're not even going to really need to use the public transportation because the city is so small. Realistically, you're probably going to be spending most of your time in the Old Town or near the Old Town, so the need for public transportation is pretty low, as the Old Town is pretty small and very walkable. You can take a bus or a metro tram, the one that goes above the ground in Bratislava. A ticket is around €1 to €1.50 and can take you all over the city wherever you'd want to go. As a tourist, obviously you're going to pretty much stick into the same zone the entire time, unless you're down to explore Greater Bratislava. They also do have taxi apps like Bolt and Uber in Bratislava, so you can feel free to use those, and they are much more cost-effective than they would be in other Western European countries. Safety and security and general vibes in Bratislava. I've been to Bratislava twice. I went once in the winter and once in the summer. They are very different, mostly because in the winter it is extremely cold, so the amount of tourists that are out and the people that will be exploring the city are obviously much less, and the sun goes down really, really early in the winter, like around 3:30, 4 p.m. It gets dark, and you're not really going to want to be exploring the city so much. In the summer, on the other hand, the sun stays up late, there's a lot of tourists out, it's a very lively and interesting place to visit. It doesn't mean don't visit in the winter, it's just the vibes in general in Central Europe in the winter are going to be a little bit dark and definitely very cold. The safety in the city is pretty high, and I would argue probably safer than most Western European larger cities. Bratislava, of course, is the biggest city in Slovakia, but since it's not that big, there's not many pickpockets, there's not many weird situations. Just make sure that you're not getting scammed, make sure that the amount of euros you're paying is the correct amount of euros that you see on the menu. Other than that, you should totally be fine. It's a very safe, generalized country. So now on to my favorite section, which is food. If there's anything that can be said of just the food in Central Europe in general, but of course specifically with Slovakia, is that the food is heavy, satisfying, really good with a beer, but is not gonna blow your mind with spicy or intricate flavors. It's just really hearty and really good stuff. The national dish of Slovakia, a dish that I actually made on my Project 197, and something that you're gonna find in every traditional restaurant of Bratislava, is called brinjové halušky. Brinjové is actually a fresh sheep's cheese, and halušky are little potato drop noodle dumplings. Basically, you can think of cheesy gnocchi topped with bacon. Really hard not to like it, really hard to finish a full plate. You'll often see that the food names, as well as the names of everything in Slovakia, are pretty unpronounceable. The Slovak language is very similar to Czech and Polish. It's the Central Slavic region of languages. But do not fear, because many Slovak people, especially the Slovaks who live in Bratislava, speak English as a second language. So feel free to just use a little bit of English, or you can really try to pronounce these really unpronounceable names on your trip. You can of course look out for kapustnica, which is a really tasty, tender sauerkraut soup with smoked meat. Very good for the winter for sure. There's also the very famous dish, ziemniakowe placzki, I think. Potato pancakes, very good, often served with smetana or basically like sour cream. I would put applesauce on them because I really like latkes from the United States. These are sort of the OG Central European version of latkes, and you're gonna find them in lots of different places. And the last thing you've gotta try is something called vypražaný syr, which basically is a deep-fried cheese, often served with fries. You can top it with a little lemon. It's sort of like the fish and chips of Central Europe, specifically the Czech Republic and Slovakia, except the fish is melty cheese. Kind of like a mozzarella stick. That being said, Slovakia also has tons of really tasty desserts and pastries that you should definitely go out and try. A lot of them feature apple and poppy seeds. They're really good winter vibe food, which is why if you do go to Slovakia in the winter, it's a nice thing to do. So in the last section, I'm going to tell you some good things to do on your trip to Bratislava. Of course, starting with its notorious Bratislava Castle. It sits high on a hill, overlooking the city, overlooking the Danube, and it's sort of like the picturesque monument of the city. Inside the castle, there's a little history museum. You can learn about the history of Bratislava and get some nice vantage points and photos while you're doing it. Next up, the logical thing is to go to the Stare Mesto, which is the Old Town. The Old Town is super pedestrian friendly. It's got cobblestone streets, it's got ancient churches, and the very famous St. Michael's Gate, which actually has sort of a church steeple on top. It's also one of the monuments of the city. You'll find lots of restaurants to try, good cafes, there's a couple museums tucked in there. And you can also spot some of their very quirky statues that they've got all over the city, including the Chumil, which is the man at work statue. It's like this guy coming out of a little manhole cover. Pretty fun. You can also walk along the old red city walls of the old city. It is a really good impression of a very fairy tale looking old town. It's got the brightly painted buildings, it's got the old steeples and churches. It's got that fairy tale vibe that you really just want to see from Central Europe on a trip. One of the quirky things about Bratislava is that, of course, it has this beautiful old town that was built during the Pressburg times, the very Germanic, Hungarian Empire times, but then the rest of the city was really built by kind of like communists, block houses, and they built this very quirky, strange monument building on the bridge that crosses the Danube, and they just call it the UFO. And on the UFO, it's an observation deck, and I believe there's also a restaurant up there. If you have the opportunity to go up there, it's a very cool kind of brutalist monument of communist Europe, and it's a great way to actually see the old town because it's on the opposite side of the river from everything that's old. From there, you can also see the massive, sprawling, sort of communist, socialist-style block housing that was developed in the 1970s and 80s in that part of Europe. If you're into that sort of history, the brutalist sort of communistic history of that time period, especially with regards to the architecture, pretty cool and definitely very unique. And once you've done that within Bratislava, you can mix in a couple nice day trips, for example, to the Devon Castle, which is about 20 minutes by bus. It's an old castle that sits up on the hill, kind of just outside of the city. Very beautiful and still in Slovakia. You could, of course, go to the small Carpathians, which is basically the start of the Carpathian mountain chain. It's a wine region. Slovakia actually makes really good wine. They have large wine cellars. You can do tastings, all of that kind of good stuff. And then if you're just like, okay, I've seen Bratislava, great. You can make your way to Budapest, 3 hours away. You can make your way to Vienna, 1 hour away. You can make your way to Brno, which is a really nice city on the way to Prague. It's about 2.5, 3 hours away as well. It's just good that it's on the Danube. There's so many good cities to visit while you're in this region. A lot of people also do the Danube River cruise. Bratislava is sometimes on that list, but it's definitely a nice stopover if you stop in Vienna. Just like hop on a little bus, go check out some Bratislava, check out Slovakia, saying I've been there, and then you can move on with your trip. The rest of Slovakia is actually quite big, not super populated, and pretty undiscovered. If you really like hiking, they have the Tatra Mountains, they have the Carpathian Mountains. If you like little European towns with very like European storybook vibes, I think Slovakia definitely has that for you. And it's just undiscovered. Not a lot of people go to Slovakia. The second city, called Košice, sits right in the middle of Slovakia, and it gets very few tourists. So if you want to be sort of a European explorer, going someplace that's a little bit off the beaten path, but nonetheless very similar in some senses to Poland and sort of to Germany and Bavaria, I think Slovakia is a good place to start. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I always enjoy making them. Bratislava is a cool place. Been there twice and enjoyed both my times there. And it's definitely good for a couple days. So what can I say? If you have any questions, make sure to, of course, comment below. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video. It definitely helps me out. It helps me keep making these travel guides. And I hope to see you in the next one.